I can get everybody's attention, you guys are keep eating. Welcome to get up, get more. The bar's still open. Help yourselves. I'm glad everybody could come out today. Thank you very much. We have actually brought in Craig Thompson Appraisers.
Hello.
And Nick Cross Appraisers. So when you guys registered or we talked to you guys, we actually had, some of you actually gave us some questions to start with. I'm sure some of you have questions. We'll have time for that at the end. We're going to actually go through some questions that either were mirrored or people gave us in the very beginning that comes up a lot, either for us or for you guys. And then they're going to answer them. Hopefully it'll answer some of your questions. It'll also may lead to more at the end. So we'll do all that at the end. We'll get through these. And then you guys we'll open it up for you guys to field all the questions for everybody else. They were a little hesitant to come in because they want to make sure they didn't have anybody here getting pissed off. Did an appraisal form maybe last week that hadn't come in yet. So we vetted everybody before, so we're good. All right, so the first one that came up, which is popular here in Lusby, but also a lot of other places. Consideration of value, what is truly comparable and what isn't to the subject considering price per square foot. So a lot of this, I think this question was, how do I evaluate a property on your end when you're looking at something if it's got a 2-car garage, 3-car garage. Here in Lusby, there's airplane hangars. There's a lot of different things. So,
What do you think? For reconsideration?
Yeah.
I mean, first and foremost, I think if you're in a subdivision, obviously you're going to try and stay in there.
Right.
Square footage wise, I mean, 25% difference in GLA.
Yeah, so
You handle this
this is
one. Yeah.
pretty easy. When a true comparable for a house is if you have a buyer and you're showing them those type of properties, those are comparables. Something that's just costs the same as what you're showing, it may or may not be. You know, if the Ram were 2 stories before contemporary, it's all different. If you have a unique property that has like an airplane hangar, you got to try to find something with that similar type of amenity. If you can't, you got to find something that has a barn, a workshop, something similar, and kind of see where it's at. I mean, as far as like gross living area percentages, typically you want to be like 20% up or down. So if a house is 2,000 square feet, you want to compare to 1,800 to 2,200 square feet.
That's not set in stone.
It's not set in stone, but just for like a ideal comparable would be in that range.
I will say this though, a lot of the reconsideration of values that we have, we will see some absurd comps come. I mean, we'll see like, 7 miles away, houses, twice as big. Just gotta try and really find something that's
Right.
similar. Yeah.
So what I like to do is start with the subject property, and on the MLS you can put that address in there, and then you can do like a radius. I always go 6 months, 1 mile, and if there's anything in there, they're comparables. Nothing's there, 2 miles, 3 miles, and then if still nothing's there, then I'll go back a year, and then still nothing, then you go a year, 5 miles. But if they're there, then that's what the comparables are. Like it or not, sometimes they're favorable, sometimes they're not, but that's kind of how we pick them, or how I pick them.
and keep in mind too, we'll talk about this later on, these guys don't always have the final say. It's reviewed by the third party that the appraisal submitted back to. It's also reviewed in-house by us as well. But there's questions for that, and we'll get into that more as we go. And skip one, did I? Why is the appraiser noting the subject property as 3-bedroom, 2 full baths when there are additional bedroom bathrooms in the basement?
This is probably the most common question that I get. So I'm sure most of you understand, but there's 2 sections in the appraisal. Like there's an above grade section and then there's a basement section. The bedroom count for the upper levels only involve the bedrooms on the main levels. The basement bedrooms are on a different line. They're calculated differently, but they're all given value. I mean,
So this isn't a subjective thing. We have to, Franny and Freddie have adopted ANSI standards, the ANSI. If a house has any area that's below grade, you cannot consider that above grade. So all the rooms below are below, all the rooms above are above. And they've even taken to like like if this area was above grade and then this was the second floor, like you can't count the area that you can't walk on above you. So this second floor wouldn't be square footage, which you see a lot in like the 2 stories that were built between early 2000s to 2010.
Bolted ceilings.
Well, like more like the 2-story family.
Okay.
Yeah. And they can be big. I mean, quality builds, a lot of them like 20 by 20.
yeah.
Are certain repairs truly necessary? Why is there a big discrepancy in the number of repairs for conventional versus FHA?
So FHA and USDA follow the same guidelines. Conventional follow, Freddie Mae, Fannie Mac, they have their own set of guidelines as well. VA has their own set of guidelines. Appraisers are responsible to follow the guidelines for each type of financing. VA and FHA are very similar. Conventional is by far the most laid back.
They're lenient, yeah.
Yeah, what would you say?
So any safety or security issue you would have to address. Missing railings. The biggest difference between conventional and FHA, I think, is paint. Anything prior to 78, FHA, you have to paint it. It can be in the house, outside the house, a fence, a shed, any of that stuff. You cannot have any defective paint on a house built before 78.
Like expose any type of electrical wiring that's
Right.
exposed, peeling paint, railings is a big one.
And this is annoying too. Like, first time not so much, but some lenders will pick on like smoke detectors and those pipes that come off water heaters. So I mean, they'll require pictures of them. Especially, right.
We both
That's
have
safety.
revision requests to show a picture of a hot water heater
Right.
to say, does it have the proper venting? So,
So you gotta be plumbers too.
yeah.
Well, I usually tell people, make sure, because sometimes they also have pictures of the water tank and there will be a pipe on these. It can be PVC, it can be copper, just put something on there.
Some lenders will also require us to take pictures of smoke detectors as well. First Home honestly doesn't,
Right.
but a lot of them want to see a picture of a smoke detector to verify that it meets code.
And a lot of you do this already, but one of your I don't want you guys, you shouldn't have to call an appraiser and run every property by them, but that's what we're here for. So all of us actually sit and talk about this, when we're in the office or together about properties. And if there's a big question and we don't know, I mean, we're allowed to call them. There's no contract or anything on the property. We'll call them and find out, about a certain house you're looking at. I've had agents call when they're walking through the house with buyers and say, well, what about this? What about this? If I don't have it, these guys pick up their phones all the time for us. So we'll get an answer for you right away.
Now we know.
So just call up. Now you know the rest of the story.
That's a hard one.
Why isn't the appraiser giving more weight to certain features?
You can start this one.
So this is, Nick was asking about this a while ago. I think this is more, maybe I'm wrong, but brand new granite countertops, brand new wide plank floors, oak vanish, things like that you'll see in a house.
Mm-hmm. So it depends 2 things. One is the market you're in, what people look for and value in that market. And the second is the price point of the house. So some houses in higher end, you expect more features than you would in like a standard home. I know in same areas, like the detached garage is valued. So typically they're worth a little more than maybe in some other markets. Do you like a specific feature or just features in
There
general?
was no specific feature in the question. Anybody want to elaborate?
I'll ask.
Sure.
So what about like a composite deck versus a wood deck or a screened-in porch?
Right.
No screened-in.
Composite decking definitely demands a more significant adjustment. A good example for this would be an in-ground pool for a $300,000 house versus, say, a waterfront house. You know, you can put in a $100,000 pool in a $300,000 house and get back 20, or you might get back all of it for a waterfront house. It really depends on
Right.
what market you're in.
And everything is getting so expensive to build now. Decks, pools, porches. We do take that into consideration. And it's not like your standard decks are $5,000, patios are $2,000. You kind of got to look at the big picture, like how much do they cost? You know, what do the other houses have? How much? Because they can be expensive. I mean, you know, a nice screen and porch can be $30,000.
Yeah.
You know.
So if I have exact
Or more.
comps
Right.
for a house, and one does not have a screen-in porch, the other one's got a composite screen-in porch, is it crazy for me to say 10 grand, 15 grand? You know, like, what's the number? Like,
So there is no set number, but here's kind of the way I look at it. If it costs 30, whatever, to get back a market value of half, isn't crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would agree with that. You're not going to get back every penny that you put in for a screen porch.
right.
No.
or a deck.
Or a deck, right.
Yeah.
Well, something we talked about too all the time is overbuilding for your neighborhood, over
Over
remodeling.
improving, yeah.
You know, which you guys probably see when you go in to list a house or something like that.
Like
Right.
a 100 by 20 deck. You know, that's a good example of that. You know, but I'm just saying, like,
It's a runway.
I'm just saying that we see it all,
Right.
for sure.
Over improvements, you're not going to get back. I mean, and even that with like garages, is there really a difference between like a 6 and an 8-car garage?
Right.
It's going to value diminishing returns at that point.
That's kind of what I was going to ask, like, for detached garages.
Right.
Is that kind of what you use for adjustments, like half the cost of building?
Not so much. So if it already has an attached garage, it's probably worth a little less with the detached. Not dollar for dollar, but if it doesn't have an attached and that's all it has, then it'd probably be worth just as much as a attached on something else.
So on that detached garage, if the cars are in tandem and the building is huge, but say it can hold 4 cars, but there's only 2 doors. What do you look at for that? Do you give any value for that?
I count doors.
Added building space?
I do it differently. I look at it as if you can get 2 cars in and move them around when you get in there. If you're talking like an 80 by 80 garage, something like that,
With 2 doors, it's still.
I mean, you're still.
But is it 20 by 40?
I'm classifying it on the appraisal as a 2 car, but I'll make a comment below saying
Yeah, that's
the functionality of this garage is.
Well, it's 28 by 40. This is the example of one that I'm specifically thinking of.
I would compare that to a 4-car garage
Okay.
because that's 10 feet per door, so to speak.
yeah.
But I always heard that if they
It's
were-
subjective.
if
I
it was
mean,
in
and
tandem,
all of this is subjective, and it's all opinion based. So nobody's right or wrong.
So I want to call my lender and say, hey,
Right.
grab Craig on this one. You know, I like that.
You hope the deal's not so tight you're depending on one little feature to make or break.
But you don't know these sellers.
I-
But I think where we run into problems is we're thinking, okay, we're, $40 a square foot in this area. Is that, how do you guys come up with what the value is per square foot or per?
It kind of depends. It depends on the area. I mean, it depends. It really depends on the price point of the house.
Here's a good example for that. Oyster Bay condo. I was adjusting. Okay. Oyster Bay condo. I did one a few weeks ago. It was a penthouse. I adjusted $100 a square foot. But for a townhouse, I'm adjusting 45.
Yeah.
For a higher end house, I'm adjusting 60 to 75, something like that. It really depends on where you're at, what area, what kind of house it is, quality of construction, that kind of stuff.
quality construction is a big part of
Yeah,
it.
huge.
So, sorry, is that just initial construction, or is that also how well they've taken care of the house? Like, if you're looking at a house that's, say, 20, 25 years old, right, like how many improvements, but how well they've taken care of original structure? Like, it can be solid built, but if they're not people that have, you know, updated or meticulously maintained their house, how much does that degradation affect your appraisal?
Well, so it's not so much a square footage question, it's picking comparable selections. So you want to do apples to apples. If you have a house that's perfectly maintained, you don't need to compare it to a 40-year-old house that's original. If you start making condition adjustments, large condition adjustments, it's probably not an ideal comparable.
That's a good point.
Okay. Do different water types make a difference? Bay versus river, creek?
I'll take that.
You live on the water?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to say about this is these are likely two different buyers. A buyer that wants to live on the bay, probably most houses on the bay don't have a pier, just have a view. There's a buyer that wants a view, and there's a buyer that wants to go out and fish, go out in the water, that kind of stuff. So number one would be, it's a different house. It's a different, if I wouldn't use something in the ranch or Port Republic that has a great view versus something that's in, you know, up the creek, you know? The bay house adjustment for view would be hot, you would adjust the bay for a higher view. You would give the creek house, you would adjust it for having accessibility to water, the ability to have a pier, that kind of stuff. So, I mean,
So $1 million view means $1 million.
$1 million view is $1 million view. But I think the biggest thing is comparing apples to apples again, you know, if that makes any sense.
To
You have
try
anything
to
after
find
that?
comparables that are on a day or comparables that are.
Views versus
Yeah.
piers and, right.
Like if you're selling a house on the bay, you're essentially trying to compare it to something on the bay. If you find something in Cookhold, you're going to compare it to something in Cookhold.
And you can expand that.
Yeah,
Sure.
sure.
You can go
I mean, you can go into Lewis. If you're in Lewis, you can go to Cookhold. You can go anywhere.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
What do you add for a boathouse?
That's a good one.
Staff numbers, please.
With a lift. I think just if you have an old boathouse that's falling down, I think just the existence of that boathouse, because you can't rebuild it, is probably 20 to 25, just for the existence of it. If you're talking about like Rainer Blair's boathouse across the creek, 125, something like that.
And nothing's more subjective than waterfront property.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find an underwriter that will argue with your adjustments with those. So waterfront's kind of worth what it's worth, I think. You know,
Yeah.
it's worth what it's worth. I mean, whatever a buyer is willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so many factors.
Right. It's so subjective. Every one's unique. I mean,
Honestly, I think it's one of the easier
right.
appraisals.
100%. It's either
you-
waterfront or it's not. That's all the
How
comparable
far
is.
back can you go on waterfront? Because sometimes
A
it's
year?
hard to find comparables.
Lenders don't want us going, unless it's our first three comps have to be within a year. We can support it with a fourth, fifth, or sixth comp that sold, 18 months ago. But the first three really have to be within the last year.
And nowadays, anything that's sold 18 months ago, the value's obsolete. I mean,
Yep.
All right, so evaluating a 1 to 4 unit rental property. I'm assuming this means how do you evaluate, rent versus cost?
so I don't do many of these.
Subjective.
Just heads up. So I mean, is this like, should I buy it or how? Or I don't know how to. There's just not.
Anybody want to expand upon that?
Yeah.
Was it
So in Southern Maryland, it's not many of them.
specific? Is that something you guys?
Who wrote this?
I don't think it's a specific, I don't think it's a specific question. I think it's, we don't have a lot of 4-unit, 2-unit, 3-unit.
I mean, say Mary's County, you might get 3 sales a year.
Right.
It's just like the water, it depends on how much someone's willing to pay.
Right. How much does it rent for? How much does it cost? Right.
Yeah.
And that's something we always
that's an
sit down,
investment
once you talk
question.
numbers, we sit down and do rent analysis versus cost, everything else. The big thing with the multi-unit properties now is you don't have to put 20-25% down. You can put 5% down. So it is, or go FHA too, but it's a huge selling point in areas that have, if Prince George's County, Frederick, Hagerstown, they have a lot of them, those areas. So
I have a client looking at one now. As the lender, will you take into consideration the rent as income?
yes,
As long as it's been rented for like 2 years or something?
they'll do rent analysis on it if it's not rent.
Yep.
Yep. All right, moving on. Value trends in the market. So, which we've seen a lot, like over the last few years with COVID, things going up, increasing. How are they established? How do you guys see that or justify it on your appraisals?
You want to start?
No.
No?
I don't really know.
All right, so this is the way I do it. Fannie Mae no longer requires this form that I use, but it's called a 1004 MC. You can go through it with through MLS. It's one of the 100 drop-down options that you can choose to print out of. And if you've got, let's just pick Leonardtown. If you put in the zip code of Leonardtown that sold in the last 365 days, it'll give you the sales. It'll break it down into 3 columns. The first 6 months of the year, the next 3-month increment, and then the next 3-month increment. And it'll pretty much show you the median price for the first 6 months, the next 3 months, and then the next 3 months. And it'll give you kind of an option of it explains it a little bit. That's one way of doing it. Supply and demand.
It's all supply.
I mean, if you don't have any supply, then obviously demand is going to be, trends are going to be going upwards.
I think certain price ranges too, right now, anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other question on that? Or
I know it doesn't affect your actual comps and stuff, but does it hold any weight if an agent says, hey, I got 5 offers at list price or over? When that comes in,
that's
say,
tough.
Look,
We hear that a lot.
Yeah. We get it. We know, Unfortunately, we're stuck to the comps that have prior sold, The days of the market adjustments are over. No underwriters accepting those. They haven't since '07. So
During the boom, that was one of our most
that was how we
challenging
did it,
things.
right.
I mean, we understood that if you had a $300,000 townhouse, you had 20 offers on it. We knew that. But if there's 3 identical townhouses that sold for $350,000, $352,000, and $349,000, there's not much that we can really. How do we,
Pick the guy with the most cash.
The appraisal waiver.
Yeah, exactly.
so this last one, I skipped over one earlier as well. This last one, we were supposed to have another gentleman here from corporate who is actually in charge of evaluating their work. He was going to come down and explain a few things about what happens after an appraisal is received, between the time it's received and the time your clients get it, if you're the buyer's agent. When they turn in an appraisal, first it's reviewed by Value Trust, just to make sure name, address, all that stuff's right. It's then kicked up to corporate. We see the value, we see if there's repairs. We also see something, whether it's called a CU rating. Fannie and Freddie both have this. It is a rating given to the property based on the appraised value at that time, based on when it's sold before. So you'll have a ratings between 1 and 5. Fannie has a CU rating and Freddie has a CU rating. They're separate, which makes no sense, and you understand that. They give it a rating between 1 and 5. Anything between 1 and 2.5, no big deal, you're good. You might have to adjust a few things here and there, but we don't have to worry about it. Anything above 2.5 may need adjustments on their part. And these guys see it, it comes back to them all the time where justify this comp, or can you make notes on why you selected this one on this street? It doesn't mean that there's a better comp out there or there's a worse comp. It's because that computer system generates a number and gives them excessive value warnings, they have to justify it and figure it out. Fannie has a database, Freddie has a database. Every time these guys do an appraisal, it goes in for the property address, the value, the square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, everything. When they do appraisal on that property, again, it's compared to what it was before. So if you sell a house to a client and then he calls for divorce and they want to sell it a year later, if they did a bunch of improvements, renovated, did a new kitchen, all this stuff, you're gonna have a high CU rate because the value may go up 15, 20 grand in a year, so it's gonna have a red flag. And then that's when they would have to, come in and make a notification. Some of the stuff you guys put, but
You know more about this than I do. I don't know much about this.
new appliances.
If you
work's been done.
guys give me a list of improvements,
That's a
I
huge
put
one.
them right in the report.
Yeah.
Per listing agent, here they are. They're stating it, not me. And it gives you a little more evidence that these things have been done to the house.
So you don't actually hate it when we.
No.
It sounds like you're not that.
I'll take all your comments. Then we got,
It'll save them work in the future because they're gonna have to go back and justify that
Right.
stuff later on. If we get CU ratings too high, sometimes there's a field review, sometimes there's a second appraisal. We try to avoid all that. There was one slide I skipped, there's called a Fannie and Freddie relief, and it means nothing to you guys. What it means to us is between 1 and 2.5, we can either send it to Fannie or Freddie. Because Fannie may say, I don't really care, that's great, it looks fine. Freddie may have a rating of 3. We have to adjust stuff on the back end for us. It means nothing to you guys. But I have conversations, and I'm sure everybody else does, I just had one with you earlier, that CU rating's high, we have to look at it and adjust and figure out what's wrong. Nothing's wrong with it. It just means that someone has to make a comment about why that CU rating was high. So I don't know when the house was sold prior, how long it had been, how long it had been in it. All that is affected. They're comparing that house to itself when it sold before. It's not compared to everything else.
Okay. So do you also appreciate a list of upgrades?
I love it, and especially on a renovated
Because
house.
I've had, like, I'm glad to know that you appreciate it, but there are so many people that don't want to hear it. So would it benefit us to have that there at the appraisal?
I love a list too, especially like I was saying, like on a renovated house, if you've done, roof, gutters, windows, siding, kitchen, baths, flooring. If you print it out, give it to me. I'm going to put that right in my report, and I'm going to say, please note the. You know what I mean?
on the flip side
It
of
also
that,
saves me time, so I'm kind of write it all out.
I wouldn't put in there in the MLS, won't go whatever.
Yeah.
Let somebody else make that determination. They'll figure it out where it can and can't go.
In other words, when you list a property and you say cash or conventional or rehab only, or won't go FHA,
Yeah,
we get that all the time.
Unless
And agents
it's
will
a
call
tear
and be like,
down.
"Oh, I can't sell
Yeah,
this
I
house,
mean,
it's
unless
going
it's a
FHA."
tear down, but if it's
It's close.
There's been times where there was a minor deficiency in a house where, and I can think of one right now, where I had to call it out because it's in the listing.
right.
They're like, you could,
All underwriters look at the listings, so,
anyway.
So just keep in mind, the CU rating with Brett here, it would have been a longer conversation. But it would have been probably a little bit better conversation of him explaining it. Really, the point behind it is if one of us call, or you're a listing agent and someone else says, well, the value is excessive on it, that's because the computer spit it out. It doesn't mean there's an issue. It means we have to address it with them behind the scenes. You guys rarely ever get involved other than there's a delay. You get that email saying, hey, appraisal's back. And if it's like 3 days before we get it to them, you may know why. So it doesn't mean anything right up front. It just means there's a difference between when it sold this time and the last time, and it's flagged. It's not a perfect system. Fannie, for instance, he gave me an example. He had one the other day where Fannie Mae came back and said everything was fine. Freddie came back and there was 2 comps on the same street, meaning it was overvalued by $60,000. But Fannie didn't say that. So that's where we just go, well, it's not going that way, we have to go this way. So we have that option. That's what it's called, a relief program, when you have both options to sell it to. It just makes things easier and quicker. We have 2 full-time people in corporate that do that. They've got about 42 years experience between the 2 of them. They haven't done appraisals in a long time, so they're communicating with these guys all the time.
We know them both by name.
So that's all for these questions. Is there anything that we didn't address or specific? And before you do that, that was quick. You answered about the hanger. Come on. Did everybody put their card in for a drawing? We're giving away free appraisals. Two gift cards for appraisals. You cannot pick which one does. So make sure you put your business card in the box. We'll draw those. But if anybody has any questions for either Craig or Nick or both,
Shoot.
I
shoot away.
think you mentioned something about changing the list price. And we talked about that.
Change it.
Yeah.
You want to address that?
I thought that was a no-no.
So the question is, changing list price in MLS. So let's say your house is listed for $300,000, you sell it for $350,000. Going back in and making that change. How does it affect your world? Or theirs?
This really applied most during a changing market. During the boom, when like you guys were trying to say earlier, prices are rising. What's one tool that we can use to establish an increasing market? Was the list to sale ratio. If you listed a house for 300 and it sold for 325, but you went in and changed the price to 325 to indicate to all other agents that this is what my contract price is, it's going to say it was 100% list to sale price. Whereas if you had just left it alone, it would have given me a tool to justify an adjustment to make for an increasing market, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. I mean,
it negatively impacts you, I think is the big one.
It just eliminates one of the tools that we can use as appraisers to justify a market adjustment, if that makes sense. And if I'm not clear, let me know. I don't know if I'm explaining
Like you said,
that.
a rapidly changing market where values are going up quickly.
Right.
It could also justify a decreasing market. It works both ways. It's not, but all agents have to do this as a whole in order for it to work properly.
So do you actually see the contract and know about closing help that's been maybe added in? How do you make any adjustments if
So, again, this is kind of a market-based question. I usually use like 2 rules of thumb. Some markets, anything over 3% is excessive. Some markets, anything over 6%. So if you see a lot of one or the other, you'll make a dollar for dollar adjustment against that comp that had excessive concessions.
So you get the full contract when you get the appraisal
Yeah.
request?
Mm-hmm. We have to.
The VA actually requires all the pertinent information to be in the appraisal, like scanned in and put in the report.
So I have a question about, someone else mentioned we need numbers. So when we're making our adjustments with our market analysis
Sure.
or our BPOs, they want to see like the adjustments per bedroom, and it's been a long time, but like there was a time when $4,000 for a half bath, $10,000 for a garage, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What number do you give to a basement bedroom versus another bedroom?
Let's see, well, that's where the price point of the house comes into play in the market you're in. You can't really, there's no, numbers. Like a fireplace is $3,000. It doesn't work in every or any adjustment, they're all kind of floating adjustments depending on what you're looking at. Try to find a house that doesn't have it and then see the difference in the cost. It's called like a paired sales analysis. You know, if one house has 3 bedroom, 1 bath, one has 3 bedroom, 2 bath, if that's the only difference, which it won't be, but you can kind of get a gauge at least of how much that extra bath helped.
Which feature are you kind of leaning towards here? Like, is there?
Well, like I could say I did a BPO this week, and the bank BPO requires that I put in a monetary amount for adjustments.
For everything?
Right.
And I've been using what I've been using for 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah.
And because they require it, I can't turn it in without filling in those spots.
Did they balk at what your numbers were?
Not yet.
Okay. Whatever your numbers are from 10 years ago, just bump them 50%.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Use those.
About right.
So,
You know.
like a bedroom could be, it depends on, again, the house, but 10,
Yeah, I mean,
10,000, who knows?
You're probably not making a bedroom adjustment for a 3 versus a 4. Maybe sometimes, but
If you have to.
2 to 3 for sure.
2 to 3. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the 2 bedroom above grade's the big one, where you make it.
Yeah.
You can quantify an adjustment.
A 1 bathroom versus a 2 bathroom house is a big deal too, because nobody wants a 1 bath house.
So that rule of thumb, the 1 mile is best. What if you're crossing zip codes? Does that have any, like?
Depends where you
A lot
are.
of
Yeah.
properties that aren't in neighborhoods.
Right.
And they're like at the corner of Callaway, and there are no comparable.
In rural areas like that, I wouldn't be concerned.
Okay. So you can go a little further.
I've had a lot of appraisals where, like, in specific, like, the subject would be in Callaway and everything else would be in, like, Leonardtown. Or,
Exactly.
you know, I wouldn't write. But if you're in, like, Waldorf, like a 2601 versus 2602, they're on different sides of the highway, I'd probably stick within those.
So as long as it makes sense.
Right,
The zip code changes.
right. Now, crossing counties,
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
do it.
crossing counties is,
That's
yeah.
tough when you're doing waterfront.
Yeah, right.
Half a mile across the river.
Right.
That always-
Now, not to say you couldn't use it as a 4th comp
Right.
Right.
to support value, but generally the first 3 should be,
It's also so tough if you're doing like Charlotte Hall, which.
it's on both.
Half of it's in Charles and half of St. Mary's.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you, I mean, obviously a Charles County house would be more expensive based on their.
Maybe not. So that's the argument. Like that used to be the case, but now you can make the argument St. Mary's might be a little more desirable. Who knows?
Do you, I'll have people that want to sell their house want to get an appraisal prior to putting it on the market. What's your thought there?
Yeah, love it. Stack of cars in the car.
I'm going to win a free appraisal.
But I mean, what would you? Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, at least the best case thing about getting a pre-market analysis is if you sell the house and it comes in low, at least you have something that you can make the argument. Well, it just appraised for
You're
this.
going to do the same appraisal for, if you did the
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
That's
Right.
a good question, because
Yeah.
I've had sellers say, well, I refinanced 6 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and that appraisal was this, why are you telling me it's this?
Well, yeah. So, that just happened. I got a call yesterday. There's 2 appraisals at the same house. They came in $20,000 different. One's 10 grand under list price. The other was 10 grand over.
Is a appraisal different than a?
Shouldn't be. Right.
So I'm going to ask,
Less scrutiny.
I'm asked the elephant in the room question, because we're all agents, you know, we found out about this whole NAR settlement, how it's going to affect us, how's it going to affect you and how you do your, because right now I think when you do your appraisals, the price of the house is what allows the seller to pay the buyer's agent, correct?
Right.
But if that money is no longer needed, is that going to affect you?
So-
I can throw that over to the lenders field.
Yeah, that-
How are we going to do that?
Well, we don't take what am I trying to say?
Commission.
We don't take commission into consideration.
Not at all.
So you can pay 4% unless it's an excessive amount. But yeah, so really that's kind of already in the price. So it might become an issue in the future. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
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 So now who pays the buyers pay the buyer's agent, right? Is that how it's set up?
Not typically.
No, not now, but moving forward.
Well,
That's what they're trying to still figure out.
Right.
so, the buyers have always paid their
The
agent.
sellers always pay commission, right?
Seller.
Right. But now moving, like with the new laws, like who's responsible?
With the new laws, there'll be no commission listed in the MLS.
Right.
We as agents, as buyers agents, will never know what commission is until we ask. Yeah, there's no place to see it.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, they're still working all that out, but,
yeah.
and then buyer's agent commission, if they want to roll it into the deal, now becomes seller contribution, which affects bottom line.
Right.
We had a running bet on how long it would take for that to come up.
Who won?
I'm glad I'm here.
It actually took a lot longer than I thought.
Well, that's because you had all those questions up front.
Right. It's distraction.
You should have had one of those up front.
That's a whole nother
Right.
seminar in itself.
So how do you feel about pictures in the MLS? Like one of your comps doesn't have enough pictures, how do you, or a good description, then how are you using it as a comp if you don't know?
I will typically call the agent and say, hey, and I know I've called a few of you about it in the past. If there's only one picture of the front of a house and it doesn't have a description or at least some type of indicator of what's been done or what kind of condition it's in, I'm going to call the agent.
Yeah. And I'm going to kind of assume the worst too.
Yeah.
Like, what are you hiding? Why aren't there any pictures? Like, you know.
If there's not a picture of a kitchen, I'm assuming that it's from 1985.
If the picture's if the kitchen's the 40th picture.
Right. Right.
What do you do about discrepancy between what the tax records say and what the actual, because you guys go in and measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what the tax record says. Whatever I measure, it is what it is. It's the only thing that we can get right. It's the only thing that we can do that's not opinionated, is the size of a house.
100%.
So,
If you have a house that's 1,000 square feet,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and you have one that has 2 bedrooms and one that has 3, how do you adjust for that if the square footage is almost the same?
You'd make an adjustment for the house with the bedrooms, right?
Yeah.
You'd make a bedroom adjustment.
right.
So you're doing an adjustment for the bedrooms and for the square footage, because I do square footage.
Yeah, well, in that scenario, a two versus a 3 is a pretty big discrepancy.
Yeah.
If it's a 3 versus a 4, probably not.
Right. I agree with that.
Do you make any adjustments for the type of septic tank?
We just had this conversation. I don't, honestly, I'm struggling with this personally. I've done quite a bit of paired sales analysis trying to figure out how it might affect value. You're referring to holding tanks? We just had this conversation. I've adjusted 10 and 15,000 for the existence of holding tanks, but I'm not positive that it's right. I'm glad Brett's not here.
Well, I think it costs about $400 to get those holding tanks pumped, right?
That's how.
You got a normal sized tank.
Right. Depending on people, I mean,
That's how I figured out the adjustment. I figured out what it's
Right.
going to cost to pump it every year, and figured out what it's going to cost over, say, 20 years, and then I figured out what it would cost to replace the septic system. And you can argue it either way. You really could. It's
because
hard,
what's
though.
a 40-year-old septic tank worth? But it's functioning
Well, the
today,
system would
but
still working. If there's room
Right.
to replace it,
right.
then there's value. But if I got to go from a septic tank to a holding tank,
Right.
I'm kind of stuck there holding it.
Yeah, I think it also depends on how big of a house it is. You know, is it if it's a
Summer home.
if it's a weekender, who cares? You pump it out once a year.
Right.
But
You can't add to the house if it's a holding tank.
I'm sorry.
You cannot increase your square footage
True.
and add on, and that is devaluing the
It's
house.
true.
Right.
And so
That's a
I
good
don't know
point.
how you would handle that in the price.
That's a good point.
So,
Limited functionality or
yeah, I mean, that's a great point. So appraisers are a snapshot of when we're there. So we kind of don't put value on what can happen down the road. It's kind of what it is today.
Right.
So
That's a good point too.
potential use A lot of people are like, well, there's two, not that, but like, there's a separate lot, can be subdivided. Well, it's not. So it's just additional acreage at the moment.
But no value difference if it's a mound system versus just a regular system?
I don't.
I don't think you could ever justify that adjustment.
Right.
Depends on where the mound is.
I would say if it's by the front, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe,
Right.
maybe. Anything else?
No, you got them here in front of you, so.
Should we keep telling our sellers to not be there when you get there?
It doesn't matter to me.
I like sellers there.
Yeah.
Or cookies, what's your favorite cake?
The only thing I don't like is when an agent or an owner follows me around.
Right.
That's the only thing I can say that I don't like.
It's just too hard to concentrate.
Right.
I have a certain way of doing things, and it's, you know, if somebody's right behind it, you kind of lose sight.
Right.
Yeah. Do y'all measure inside walls or outside of the house most of the time?
Outside.
I'll do inside.
No. I'm saying, but you're supposed to. The measurement of a house is the, like but you're adjusting for the difference with the wall.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Okay.
But you're measuring the outside
2
perimeter.
by 6, right.
Yeah, oh, 100%. You add whatever
Yep.
the construction is.
I know it's easier to do the outside.
Well, with the laser, yeah, you
yeah.
kind of, depending on the house and that kind of stuff.
So outside of the list of upgrades that I feel like I can leave now, what else, like, do you guys like or not like from us?
Or find helpful, or
Right.
don't be so
Annoying stuff. Like, what's helpful, what's not?
Pet peeves, tell us.
Don't blow up my
Be
phone.
honest.
I don't know. I kind of, whatever I get, I kind of take a quick peek through. Anything that's useful, I take out. Anything not, I toss. If you have comps, put them in there. I'll take a peek at them. You know, chances are a couple of them probably going to be the same.
There hasn't been very many times where an agent gave me a comp that I didn't already know about. I'd say 9 times
Right.
out of 10, I don't use any of them. Not that I don't think you're right or wrong. I just, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's really great. Yeah.
So what if you just cannot find comps, what do you do? You know, for a while there's been like very few sold properties. And if you get into a position where I just cannot find anything, you go out farther?
Exactly.
Go back farther? What do you do?
You go back, I mean, going further is, like, I'll go 10 miles in St. Mary's. I'll go 10 miles in the center of Calvert County.
Okay.
Um,
So you'll go out farther rather
For sure,
than going
yeah.
back in time? Okay.
So my
Well, we're capped at a year.
Oh, all right, okay.
So,
Yeah. My new construction in Solomon's, they were almost finished. I bang my head with comps every time I pull one of those up because it's such a
Solomon's is tough.
little beast.
Really tough. There's a
Besides, what do you like to drink? Is there anything what to do to help with that? Because it's such a little teeny micro neighborhood
It is.
that I want to pull comp from Annapolis. I know it's not the same market, but it's the same walking neighborhood. It's the same feel. I don't have anything like that. I mean, we could pop up to Chesapeake Beach a little bit.
yeah,
But-
I would go to Chesapeake Beach. You can't go to
You
that.
can't go there, right?
It's,
Yeah,
Yeah, just like Cedar, we can't compare Cedar Cove to Southampton.
right.
It did
But there's just no, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
my comps are all, they end up being a year old.
yeah, that's, I mean,
And then they're 10% behind on the
But
market.
I will say this,
We're
though.
always trying to stretch the
Right.
new number.
Even though we might not be able to use them as comps, they're still an indicator of value. Like, you can still get an idea of what the house is worth based on something that sold 14 months ago,
Yeah.
you know? And I use them all the time like that. I'll put them
Yeah.
as my 4th and 5th comps
Yeah.
all the time.
Well, guys, there's plenty of food still, bar's still open.
Good.
We're gonna do the drawing for,
She's been trying to ask a question for a while.
the appraisals.
you got one in the back
What, you
there.
got another one? Go ahead.
I do.
Oh, all right, well,
I don't think you like my voice or something. So I am under contract for my first custom build, like independent builder, my house, like I've never dealt with it before. How different is that appraisal process for you all? Because there's nothing I can tell you.
So those are hard because they're not, you know, custom builds don't go on the market. They're for a specific buyer.
Right.
you got to hope something that similar quality is sold, and you can make an age adjustment or something like that. Yeah, or you can take. Yeah. Oh yeah. Right.
Like
Or they got.
a new construction on large acreage is probably the hardest
Right.
appraisal that we do. Like if you've got a 10-acre like 10 acres on a 3,500 square foot house, new construction, it's
And those houses are expensive
It's
because they're
hard.
custom
It's really
done,
hard.
and people pay up for what they want. You know.
Right, that's why, because the materials they're using are not common for the area.
Right.
The shape of the house is absolutely not consistent with what we see in the rest of the county. I mean, it's just
Right.
different. So I'm like, how do we, do we send you, do I send you kind of Pinterest boards? To be like, hey, this is what it sold for in the center of New York where they got the idea from. Like,
I'll ask those builders if they have sold anything like that around, or spec'd anything, or and just to see.
Are they paying cash?
not. That's why
Right.
I'm raising the question.
And this does become a problem. I mean,
Yeah.
if they don't have enough money to cover or whatever, because they can easily pay 20% over what a market bears, but they're overbuilding a property usually.
I have another question, sorry. Permits. Do you guys look for permits on decks and basements and things like that? Because I keep hearing different.
So, no, we're not safety inspectors. That's kind of not our scope of work. What I usually say is whatever is permissible in the market area, it is unknown if it was permitted or not. And then that's kind of an underwriter decision to make, how far they want to look into it.
yeah.
One more. Barn dominiums. Have you done many of those?
Never seen one.
My head hurt because my phone's ringing quite a bit more asking about them. And I'm like, I know there was one up off St. Andrews that just,
I haven't done any yet.
I haven't either.
yeah, I don't know if they would be, years ago I used to bang my head with log cabins.
I would think they would be easier to do
Remember
because,
those? Oh, you got a log cabin? We can't finance it.
yeah, well, you need 2 log
You
cabin
need 2
comps.
comps,
Right.
yeah.
With the barn dominiums, the size might help you out because they are massive structures. So they might be a little bit easier to do in the beginning when you're comparing smaller sites.
I didn't have quality of construction because it's just not the same as a typical stick built when it's on a slab.
Yeah,
I just decline those appraisals and let Craig, let you do it.
I decline them too. There is we've been doing this long enough where sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Right.
Because all appraisals pay the same pretty much. You can be a townhouse, you can do a $2 million waterfront. They're,
So now I know why you both declined one.
Probably.
probably.
Sometimes I see our names and go,
I think it was more the property than it was anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get something there's no comps for, I mean, what are you going to do? You're just guessing. I mean,
well, that's what it becomes.
right.
Yeah, but couldn't you have guessed?
Not with all
But
the
then we got an underwriting fight, and it's just,
review, appraisal, and all the other headaches that come along with it.
right.
Sometimes we have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Did I miss anybody? No? All right.
Good.
Greg, Nick, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us, guys. Thank you.